All right. Hey, let's launch into a new unit today, and that's going to be our cell unit, right? Cell unit's everyone's favorite unit in biology. That was sarcasm if you couldn't tell, because you have talked about this probably in fifth grade and seventh grade. Now we're talking about it. You're probably going to talk about it in college. It's that kind of one of those core concepts in biology that you spend a lot of time getting to know your cells here. All right. So today we're going to talk about mainly cell theory today and how that came to be. We're going to start off with the chapter title here, and this is a selfie of mine. Get it? Cell. Anyway, these are actually my cells. Okay, these are my cheek cells that I used in the lab once upon a time. But it's kind of a cool look. Underneath the microscope, you can clearly see that dense center of the cell that we're going to call the nucleus. You should know at this point, but there's look at some probably squamous epithelial cells that would make up the inside lining of your cheek, obviously stained blue. I do not have blue skin. All right, so this first part is going to be mainly around structure and function of the cell. But like I said, today we're going to be spending some time talking about the discovery of cells. And I like talking about this because it's messy, it's old, it is interesting through a certain lens as you go. So the discovery of cells is actually one of the oldest things that we talk about in biology class. A lot of biology is pretty cutting edge. We're just kind of figuring out how some of the things work. However, cells, we've known about cells for a long time. Now we continue to figure out a lot more about them, but it's going to be one of the oldest things that we talk about in class, and that is going to be 1665 is the accredited date for the beginning of cells by an interesting dude named Robert Hooke. He observed dead cork cells by using a microscope. Now, microscope's kind of a loose term. His microscope was that thing over on the left there. All right, so but it was new for the time. All right, they um, I think Zacharias Jensen's the guy's name, but Galileo is in there too. But anyway, so people were using lenses and using them for magnifying things, and they started looking at a bunch of weird stuff with microscopes. And then it was later on, 8 years later, that the first living cells were observed by Anton von Leeuwenhoek. And that's Anton down there in the middle. But what the cork would have looked like is on the right there. Okay, the look at different cells, and that's where the name came from, as I thought about look like cells. We think of jail cells today, but at the time it was actually where monks lived in monasteries, kind of like dorm rooms were considered to be cells there. So um, there's the discovery of cells. Like I said, it is interesting. It's very sloppy. There's a video in the notes that goes through. Boy, there's about 5 or 6 different names in there that were involved in the study, and over the course of about 150 years, finally we come up with this idea of a cell theory. All right, and I like talking about that because science is messy. All right, if there's one thing that we've learned from COVID, it's that it's not like science is going to answer the question the next day. That's never going to be the case. Science needs to take time to run the experiment to figure out what is exactly going on. And in this case, it was 150 years later, after a bunch of different scientists did a bunch of different studies, that we came up with the cell theory. I say we, not me. I wasn't there, but scientists came as a species. We came up with the cell theory, and the 3 parts. And this is the most important thing for the day. So make sure that you're taking this in. Is that all living things are composed of one or more cells? That is a requirement for life, as we know it right now. It has to have at least one cell. 2 cells are the basic units of structure and function in an organism. So the kind of the base building blocks of organic life are cells. And then 3, and this is the one that took them a long time to agree upon, is that cells come only from the reproduction of other cells. We're going to be getting into mitosis later on, but this idea that you have to have reproduction coming from existing cells, they don't just spontaneously appear. Believe it or not, that was a point of contention for a long time in there. Like I said, here's that video. If you're interested, there it's linked down in the notes below. But it takes something that's kind of a mundane thing that we learn about and kind of put some context at the time behind it and just how cutthroat science was, and just the amount of people involved in that discovery. The other thing that I want to intro here before we get into cell parts is that cells are very diverse. Okay, like I said, they're the building blocks of life, but I always think of them as like Lego pieces, and we're gonna be talking more about that later. But the idea of you have all different kinds of shapes of cells and functions of cells and all of these things that are able to do all these variety of tasks in our human body. All right, if you think about it, we have brain cells, we have bone cells, we have skin cells, we have blood cells, we have muscle cells. All of those are extremely different and look nothing like each other for the most part. But they all have the same basic parts inside there, even if it's different quantities of certain parts. But so we have many different shapes, and some cells also change their shape. White blood cells are kind of or fluid in some of their different examples there. All right. Okay, we're going to stop there. The rest of our notes are going to be about cell parts and what their functions are. But that is it for my version of the cell theory. Thanks for tuning in here.